Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it.
I'm a feminist, but... The Guilty Feminist is the award-winning live comedy podcast from me, Deborah Frances-White, which explores our noble goals as 21st century feminists and the hypocrisies and insecurities which undermine them. Previous guests include Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Hannah Gadsby, Sindhu V, Emma Thompson, and many more. To listen, just search for Guilty Feminist wherever you get your podcasts. And to get tickets for the live show, go to guiltyfeminist.com.
When you're traveling, you don't have access to your amazing sex goodie stash. So you start to pack your lube for sexy time in your toiletry bag. And when you open your bag back up, the lube you packed, of course, spills all over your toothbrush, makeup, and floss picks. Enter a brand new product from Uberlube that will get your lube to your destination without spillage. They're new good-to-go travelers. Perfect for your purse, pocket, gym bag, or carry-on luggage. The Good-to-Go Traveler features the same Uberlube product in a discreet aluminum traveler that comes in 6 colors. Try Uberlube and their Good-to-Go Traveler now with code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at uberlube.com. In a world that constantly encourages you to change, it's bold to just be yourself. Sexual expression and satisfaction are different for everybody, so rather than conforming to others, focus on falling in love with who you are. Lion's Den sources the very best products to help you find what you like and help you feel confident expressing your sexual desires. You can get 15% off in-store and online using code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com to begin exploring everything about yourself. Follow them on social at LionsDenAdult on Instagram and TikTok. Hello. Welcome back to another episode. Today's episode is really different from any other episode that we've ever had before. We talk about sex after a brain injury with amazing author Annie Liontas. And let me tell you about them. Annie Liontas is the genderqueer author of the queer-crip memoir Sex with a Brain Injury on Concussion and Recovery, which was featured on NPR's Fresh Air with Terry Gross and selected as Self Magazine's Book of the Month. They co-host the literary podcast LitFriends. At George Washington University, they helped to secure a Mellon Foundation grant on disability justice to bring storytelling to communities in the criminal justice system. Annie lives in Philadelphia with their wife, dog, and Email, the rabbit. Great name for a rabbit. We talk about this in the interview. But yeah, I think that you'll really love this one. It is so authentic. Annie is just so wonderful. They are very sweet and vulnerable. They really share their story of what it was like for them to go through a recovery of traumatic brain injury and what it's like to relate to your partner and to your own body and mind after that. The challenges, the trials and tribulations that they faced, some of the harder parts, some of the kind of ways that they coped with experiencing their traumatic brain injury and how sex and intimacy looked different afterwards. And so without further ado, here I am with Annie. Good morning, Annie. How you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
I am absolutely tickled pink that you are here today to talk all about various kinds of things. Spoiler alert. Sex with a brain injury. We have never talked about anything like this in our over 200 episodes of the podcast, and I am so honored that you are here today to talk through it. There are a lot of things on our plate that we have to go through today, but first and foremost, we're going to get started with the Quick and Dirty, which is a new-ish segment just about, hot topics that we're thinking about. It's a get to know you game. And I have 3 different questions that we'll go through, and hopefully they will be quick and dirty. And so the first one, or clean and cute, I don't know, either one. And
I'm from Philly. We usually do quick and dirty.
Oh, amazing. My brother lives in Philly. I love Philly. It's such a great town and it's great food. Holy shit. Really.
I know the food is like our top secret. Don't tell everybody.
Spectacular. Yeah. Sorry. I'll delete that from the podcast.
Okay. We will chase them out anyway.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Billy's amazing. But, okay. So I want to know, what is your go-to cuddling position if you are a cuddler? What do you like? What do you like in your cuddling?
Probably little spoon to my wife's big spoon.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. I also really like being little spoon. It's just so cozy. You just kind of feel cute, taken care of. And then whenever I try to be big spoon to my fiance, where does your arm go? I don't understand. Like it goes kind of under the pillow to hug, but then it kind of goes numb.
It's like a wrestling competition. Who's going to make the little spoon?
That's right.
Who's going to beat out the other one to be the little spoon?
Correct.
But I'm somebody who doesn't. I'm like big spoon in the rest of my life, so it's a nice place to take refuge.
Oh, love it. Okay, great. I understand the power dynamics need to shift, perhaps. Under cuddling. Okay, the next question is, what is the weirdest place that you've ever had sexy times? Either hooking up, penetrative, everything in between, kind of touching, anything you wanna talk about there.
I guess when we were living with my wife's aunt, there was no privacy, so we went and had sex in the train parking lot a couple times.
Oh wow. Like on the bench?
No, that was mostly in the car, but I will say we had sex at like an Indigo Girls concert again in the car. They were like literally playing on the summer stage. So I guess a lot of it was just car sex in proximity to crowds.
Okay, kind of into that though.
The Indigo Girls one is too on brand. I don't know what we were doing, but
that's really, you can't write that. That's amazing.
No.
Incredible. I would say mine, it's not that weird, but like I lived in San Francisco when my fiance and I were first dating, and I had this like half bath in my room that was basically like renovated in the closet. So it was so small that it had like the teeniest little sink and then just a toilet, and like two people should not be able to fit in there, but we definitely fucked on that toilet for sure. To try to minimize noise, and just really not get it too crazy for roommates that we had. But when you got to do it, you got to do it. You got to figure it out.
You got to bless the toilet sometimes.
You got to bless the toilet. I mean, we basically had sex in the closet is really what it was. It was just happened to be a half bath that was renovated in there. Okay, last quick and dirty question is, if you could choose one fictional character to romp in the hay with, which I love how Sadie, my producer, wrote this, romp in the hay with, who would you choose and why?
It was probably a tie between Annie, protagonist from Jeanette Winterson, because she's sexy and sad. And
double S.
Yeah. It's like an entire subgenre of queer lady music, really. But
yes.
Probably the other one is Jekyll and Hyde, because you'd have two wildly different experiences.
Well, that is not what I expected, but really fantastic answer. That's so funny. I read that book, I feel like in middle school, and just feel like remembering being like, whoa, this guy is crazy. There's a lot going on here. That's such a good answer. I would say my answer would be the priest from Fleabag, Andrew Scott.
Oh, good move. I wasn't thinking movies.
Yeah, fictional character. I feel like usually, I mean, I do read a lot of fiction, but I don't read like that much sexy fiction. So I feel like,
Jekyll and Hyde wasn't sexy for you.
Not as a 12-year-old. I didn't really get turned on personally by that book. But yeah, I would say the priest. I think Andrew Scott is so hot, obviously, and he's very hot and tortured in All of Us Strangers. I'm not sure if you've seen that movie. It's very sexy and sad. And yeah, the priest in Fleabag is just like fucking hot, dude. Like it's just he is hot.
Well cast.
Well cast. Yeah, okay. Incredible. Thank you so much.
Well, then I'm gonna have to amend my answer to Queen Latifah and set it off. That's gonna be the fun.
Oh, hell yeah. Queen Latifah. Wow. She is sexy and happy, it seems.
Yes.
She seems to be doing very well and aging beautifully and is very hot.
Gorgeous, super hot.
Yes. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for amending your answer. Thank you for playing the quick and dirty. And I'm so excited to get to the meat and potatoes of this interview, as I say. And let's talk through your journey from experiencing multiple concussions to writing your memoir, Sex with a Brain Injury. I'm curious, like, tell us about it. What inspired you to share your story with others? Like, give us the deep dive.
I had 3 head injuries in 2016 over the course of like 12, 13 months. And what I didn't know at the time was that if you have one head injury, you're 1 to 2 times more likely to have a second. If you have a second, you're 2 to 3 times more likely to have a third. If you have a third, 3 to 4, right? So you can see it's like that it becomes an exponential risk. So after the first one, I was recovering okay, but the second and third ones, which were not too far apart, and really was the second one that kind of tipped me. All of a sudden, I just had a very different relationship to my body, to sex, to the world, to overhead lighting. I mean, everything was just different, and I had to navigate the world in brand new ways. And I'm a writer and a reader, and I kept going to books that could help me explain myself to me. But what I kept finding mostly was like self-help and clinical. And Toni Morrison says, God live with the Queen, says that if you don't see the book in the world, then you have to write it. If you don't see the book you need to read, then you need to write it. And so I didn't ever think that I would write a book like this. I'm a fiction writer. The idea of like writing my sex life for like my family and father-in-law is like was not exactly
Understood.
on my life bucket list.
Right.
But I was also grappling, with this self-estrangement, and writing is the way that I understand the world and my place in it. And Joy Harjo, just to quote one other writer I love, says, like, nothing takes one away from themselves like injury and illness. And I think she would add addiction. And so it was just this like impetus, this like drive to like even more than to communicate with people initially, just like figure out what is going on with me. And the first piece I wrote was the title essay, Sex with a Brain Injury. It was the first piece published in 2019. I did not think that it would become a whole book. But it was I wrote that piece. I kind of wrote it it felt like I was on fire when I wrote it. And I finished it and was like, oh, there's a lot more here to say. And especially because so many people, we haven't had those conversations around brain injury. Like we have a very narrow cultural understanding of brain injury. So it just felt like, yeah, we have to get this conversation going in a way that's like beyond the doctor's office or, beyond, beyond the like private lives of people.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine while you were writing this, there were so many things that were coming up for you. And I'm sure it's very hard to explain what you're feeling in your body to other people and partners and people in your life who you trust, but like don't really get it. Is that something that was coming up for you?
Yeah. And I think it's a human condition that we're just like locked inside these like meat bags, and our experiences are like really in some ways are just our own, and we're a bit isolated. Even when you have like, a partner or best friends, like I don't know what your pain is like, and you can't know what my pain is like. And traumatic brain injury specifically is an invisible disability, right? Which is part of the reason I needed to externalize it in language. Is there are all these people who have this unseen suffering and frankly, like symptoms that, or like post-concussive syndrome sequelae that people doubt, right? It's like, oh, it's in their head, or, oh, it can't be that bad, or they're faking it. That's like a kind of big cultural idea, and like one that pervades the legal system. Oh, this, they're faking it for the money, right? So it just felt like, a necessary part of the work is like, how do you express this kind of pain and vulnerability and weakness when we have all this cultural baggage, all this historical baggage, and it felt like pretty important to get that down.
Totally, yeah. And in your book, you're really candid about how your brain injuries affected your sex life and intimacy with your partner. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on some of the more specific challenges that you faced and how you two navigated those obstacles together.
This is very similar to other injuries or chronic illnesses or disabilities, particularly invisible disabilities. You know, when you're going through an experience like this, you can often feel like a stranger to yourself, right? As you navigate like a new diagnosis or a new way of being in your body. And if you feel like a stranger to yourself, then certainly your partner is going to feel distanced, apart, and estranged from you, and vice versa. And I guess you can have sex under those conditions, but in a relationship, something starts to fray and really get undermined by that psychic distance. You're just like, who am I? I don't move the way I did. Or, particularly for me, orgasms gave me migraines. I mean, anything gave me migraines, but orgasms specifically, it was like, okay, if I do this, I'm going to be suffering not just for tonight, but it's probably going to tip off this entire cycle of additional days of migraines.
Wow, that's really intense.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to navigate, like, is this worth it for me? Like, how would you kind of like mitigate that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I had to be choosing between just like health and feeling well and then something else, right? Like something that is guaranteed to bring pain or like quite likely to. And so there were days where that vulnerability, I'm the kind of person, it's gotten better so that I am back in the world, but especially in those 5 years of recovery, I could be like on the trolley, somebody could elbow me in the head, that's it. I'm done for the day. So it's this like vulnerability that makes sex this like taut kind of anxiety laden act, right? So it's not just my issues and my pain, but now my wife knowing that if she knocks me in the head or we're too rough or whatever, all of a sudden, I'm going to be in a lot of pain. So that's a mind fuck for both people in different ways, right? Like feeling this experience, like sex is supposed to free you. In my mind, like sex is the ultimate freedom, right? And it's like it's like all the shit that we have about our corporeal selves and our lives and our careers, all goes away for a few minutes, and you're just in this, transcendent place. But if you're like thinking about the pain and your partner's thinking about the potential of causing pain, it really disrupts things. And we had to kind of work through that for a long time.
Yeah, that was going to be actually my next question of like, how exactly would you all like navigate communication around things like needs, sexually and otherwise, like boundaries, desires during your recovery process and beyond? Like, what did that really look like, and what kinds of tools and like maybe like other things came into play when discussing these kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's like an imaginative act, right? Like, when we think about sex and disability in this country, we think of those as impossibilities. There's a kind of cultural revulsion to the idea of sex and disability, and kind of paralleling that. When we think of queerness and sex, we think of like oversex and like a kind of an exaggerated relationship to sexuality. Both of those are dehumanizing, right? So like at the end of the day, we're two people, two bodies with this, seeking this deep connection that is a kind of nourishment that you don't get in any other way. I think understanding it as something creative and imaginative to return to say like, we're not broken, we're just different now. And what does that look like? And I think there's definitely a place where it's important to talk, right? Just using words, using language to talk about it, like how each of you are feeling that day, or like what is going to likely result in more pain or pleasure. So language is important, but at a certain level, I do think sex is its own language. And so the spoken word can undermine that a little bit, right? And so part of that is like finding ways to trust and communicate both like through spoken language and then like other ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think like back to the orgasm thing, right? Like we are conditioned in our society generally to feel like orgasm is kind of like the literal and figurative peak of like a sexual experience that we should strive for. And I think we are doing a lot of unlearning as, of course, sex educators, people who listen to podcasts like this, people who are, aware of kind of like queer and more feminist experiences where like there are lots of different ways to have sex and experience that, and none of them need to end in orgasm. And so I wonder if it's a similar kind of thing of like, okay, like because like one of you has a brain injury or is recovering from a brain injury, like what does a peak experience for us look like if it doesn't include something like an orgasm, or it doesn't include something like rough play, or it doesn't include these things that are really typical for us in order to feel enjoyment? Like where else can we find that fulfillment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great articulation. And, even thinking of it as peak suggests a kind of like singular model that tends to be like male and patriarchal and heterosexual. Right. But I'm also somebody who like never faked an orgasm and mostly had orgasms every time I had sex. So it was a loss in that, right? So it's like, let me grapple with this loss. Yes. But also there's a distinction between sex and sensuality. And so I think you can have sensual experiences with your partner, which we did, right? Was like, how can you connect, and what does intimacy look like today if one, and it's not always me, right? Like we're both bodies. So there might be days she's not feeling well, right? So like what can connection look like that's not prescripted, right? And so that does create like opportunities for a different kind of play.
Like having sex in the car at an Indigo Girls concert, for instance. I walked right into that one.
Yeah.
That's really great. Okay, moving on a little bit, but still part of your memoir, right? You discuss the invisible nature, you kind of mentioned this a little bit before, of mild traumatic brain injuries and how they're often misunderstood or overlooked. And so I'm wondering if you can share what you hope readers and listeners take away from your story in terms of raising awareness about the issue of traumatic brain injury.
People with brain injuries are often called the walking wounded because we move through the world and around others completely unseen. And usually when I do readings, like I was in New York, in Brooklyn at Franklin Park this week, and it was probably an audience of like, I don't know, 60,
Franklin
70.
Park, the burger place?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite restaurants. I used to live right near there. Yeah. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
They do a Monday night reading once a month. So, and it's great. They have amazing people come out. Yeah.
Oh, I live in Oakland now, but I lived in Brooklyn for 2 years and really loved Franklin Park. That was where we went all the time. Please continue. I love that place.
Yeah, it's really fun, and the crowd is really great. And I want to say there were maybe 70 people in the room, and I just said, how many of you know at least one person who had a brain injury? And almost everyone raised their hand.
Wow.
And I should note that there were 6 readers on the bill. It wasn't just like an event for me. So they weren't like there because they were curious about brain injury. They were there for, the burgers and the readers. And so it's just all this unseen suffering. And when I started doing this, so this is definitely a memoir and it draws on my experience, but I started to ask the question of like, in addition to what don't we see about TBI, who don't we see? And so my research took me to places like the criminal justice system, where someone in prison is 7 times more likely to have had a brain injury before they got to prison.
Oh, wow.
Which suggests that a lot of the behaviors that come from brain injury are criminalized, which includes like emotional ability and aggression. And similarly, regarding housing insecurity, 1 in 2 people who have lost their home are likely to have had a brain injury before they lost their home. So instead of TBI being this like effects of places or conditions we think of as like violent or likely to result in something like brain injury, it actually is a precursor to a lot of these socio-political issues that but it's just an unseen factor. So the book was in part to say, like, how pervasive is this? What don't we see about it? And kind of culturally, how do we have to shift our thinking around it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just also thinking about football, right? I mean, I'm sure this has come up for you so many times, but just like that, I feel like is such a clear way to get people to really listen. And people know about the fact that football players are likely to get CTE and traumatic brain injury. And yet we still have these gatherings. It's a multi-billion-dollar event, the Super Bowl. We, get together and everyone shares about their teams. And like, I just don't know. I think like it feels very similar. It has differences, but it draws parallels for me when in public health grad school, I was looking at cigarette ads and how so many people were so sexy and sad, no, just sexy about cigarettes and just so excited that everyone, doctors smoke them, pregnant people smoke them. And then slowly, even though we know that cigarettes and nicotine cause lung cancer and so many health problems, we went to vaping and cigarettes are still popular, they're less popular, but like point being is like, how long will it take for us to know that something is really, really bad for our health until it is outlawed or changed? Like that's something that that's so crazy to me that like we know about CTE and we're not doing anything about it.
Right. I've actually made that comparison to smoking and like our cultural relationship to smoking and some other things I've written. And I think it sort of seems dead on, right? Because you're thinking about these football players who we think of as like bodies, not people, right? Like armor, even more than bodies. And I'm thinking of like not only them, but they're like girlfriends and wives and boyfriends and mistresses. It's like how this is an unseen, right? And it's not new. It's quite historical. But in the book, I talk about like there are all kinds of people that we, like Lady Gaga, George Clooney, they both had brain injuries. Henry VIII was just discovered to have had CTE, right? What the football players have. And it explains a lot of his like insane murderous behavior. So yeah, it's like very far reaching historically and culturally. But we have not looked at it at all.
Crazy.
And especially because it disproportionately affects women. So that's a really big part of it. It's like women suffer from post-concussive disorder far worse statistically than men. And like cis girls playing soccer, for instance, are twice as likely to have post-concussive disorder than cis boys playing. So
what's up with that?
We don't know because we haven't looked at it.
Oh
we don't know. God. We're just like, oh, that must suck.
That's so classic. I mean, it's just like, how the clitoris wasn't in medical textbooks until the 90s. I mean, women weren't allowed as research subjects until like the early 2000s. Like, it's just a wild thing that we're just kind of do along on our day. And then just women and people with uteruses and vulvas just are not included in certain things. I just I don't understand it. I don't get it. Sexism is the answer, but
sexism is one of the top answers. There's a brain bank in Boston that holds like most of the brains studied by science, and like 3% of them are women's brains.
Oh my God!
I know.
What the hell?
It just really. At that point, at those levels, you're like, oh, science doesn't care. We know this personally, but statistically, like science doesn't care. Medical science doesn't care about women's bodies.
That equally makes me want to cry and scream at the top of my lungs. Like that makes me so angry that we are just okay with the fact that we're not studying women and we don't care about their health and well-being on a grand scale.
Yeah.
I'm about to get personal here, so listen up. I'm going to tell you a fun fact about me that you definitely didn't know. The lube that I use most consistently is Uberlube. I really mean it. If you were here with me right now, I'd tell you to go over to my nightstand drawer and tell me what you see. That's right, you would see a bottle of Uberlube. If you've never heard of Uberlube, let me tell you about it. Uberlube is a silky smooth silicone-based lube recommended by leading doctors, and its body-friendly ingredient list makes it widely used by people with sensitivities to lubricants. Another amazing thing about Uberlube is that it doesn't leave a sticky residue like water-based lubes do. It lasts for a long time and doesn't stain clothing or bedding. I have 3 bottles of Uberlube on my bedside table right now, ready when I need it. If you're someone who wants to feel more pleasure in the bedroom, use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at Uberlube.com. Trust me, it's amazing. If I were to tell you I was conducting a masturbation experiment with the magic wand, what would some of your hypotheses be? Well, I did do a masturbation experiment with the magic wand, so let me tell you what some of mine were. Number 1, anxiety, tension, and stress will decrease during and after daily magic wand use. Number 2, daily magic wand use will be associated with improved mood, confidence, and happiness when compared with no sexual activity. And number 3, sleep length and sleep quality will improve during daily magic wand use when compared to no sexual activity. After running the numbers, 2 of those hypotheses were true, and one of them is false. Want to know which ones were true and which one was false? Go to sexedwithdb.com/magicwandexperiment to learn more about the experiment. Read some of my daily journals and watch some of my daily vlogs, and find the results of these hypotheses and a few others, and so much more. Let me tell you about one of my favorite pleasure product retailers out there, Lion's Den. If you haven't heard about Lion's Den before, I can't wait to tell you about them. Lion's Den opened its first retail facility in Columbus, Ohio in 1971. That's right, over 50 years ago. Since then, they've grown to more than 50 outlets throughout the US, building their reputation on high-quality products, low prices, and a knowledgeable sales staff who can help you find the perfect toy. One of the many things I love about Lion's Den is that they advocate for a sex-positive perspective on intimacy and sexual well-being, and strive to break the stereotypes and stigma surrounding sex by providing comprehensive educational resources to empower everyone to enjoy life to the fullest. They are simply amazing. Lucky for you, Lion's Den is giving my listeners an exclusive discount of 15% off your purchase, in-store and online with code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com. What are you waiting for? Get your amazing Lion's Den toy now. Here's your health fact of the day. The vaginal microbiome is the ecosystem of bacteria, yeasts, and other microorganisms that live inside your vagina. When its balance is off, it's vulnerable to infections and other gynecological health complications. If you're someone who has chronic BV, yeast infections, or UTIs, you're probably super familiar with this concept. But what if there was a non-invasive way for us to learn about our vaginal microbiomes and figure out what we needed to be healthy? Say hello to Day. Give your vagina some TLC with Day's at-home vaginal microbiome screening tampon. That's right. Day uses a non-invasive at-home tampon screen that will help you understand your risk of vaginal infections like yeast infections or BV, STIs, fertility implications, and other gynecological health complications. Get your at-home vaginal microbiome screening now at www.yourday.com. That's DAYE. And use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at checkout. So I have one more question about just you and kind of like, you know, after writing this book, and you're someone who has really navigated these complexities, I would say, of sex and intimacy post-brain injury. And a lot of people are doing this, right? Like a lot, I don't know if you have the stats off the top of your head, but like, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are suffering from, you know, post-brain injury. And like, I'm wondering for you, what advice would you give to others who may be facing similar challenges in their own relationships, in their own minds, and their own bodies?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. And I mean, I can't help but think when I started writing this book, well, before I started writing this book, I was going to a support group. And I remember saying, like, everything's different, even intimacy. And I just saw all these people nodding. And some of these people were like 20 plus years older than me. And I just thought, like, wow, so this is just something we're suffering through in silence. And part of that is generational, I think, but the cultural in the ways we've been talking about this being invisible. And I guess the first thing is that when these sorts of things happen and you encounter what the philosophers call the crisis of the conceptualized self, you're so not you, that people just react in like kind of the ways we did when we were kids, right? Either to like hide in our corners or like throw a temper tantrum about something completely unrelated, right? So we kind of devolve into this into just like a self that's not our fullest self. And I guess the thing that helped my wife and I the most, because I do think at the end of the day, this is a love story, most of all. And a big part of what happened to us is like, are we going to stay together or are we not? Because brain injury is really difficult to get through. And so I guess, the first thing is to recognize that everyone's going through this, the person who has the brain injury and also the person who doesn't, because everyone actually has a brain injury in a family, even if it's just a single member of that family. Everyone's dealing with it. Everyone's got to take the effects and the consequences. So the first is just to like recognize like everybody's dealing with this. And then, of course, we always talk about communication is the key, but really just like, can you be honest about how you're feeling today? Can you be honest about one thing that's going on for you that like is hard to express or your partner might have trouble hearing? Like, can you challenge yourself to do that a little bit? And then hopefully they will do the same, and that just creates these opportunities for conversation to say like, okay, if we are in fact an us, right? Like, how do we navigate this together? And if you are single, I just hope you can reach out to friends, because that was hard for me too. It's just like not only letting my partner in, but letting my friends in and helping them understand just what I was going through. Right. So like let one person in.
Yeah. And I'm wondering too, like what kinds of resources there are out there, specifically at the intersection of sex therapy and disability, like information, like therapists who have information about traumatic brain injury, and if they're able to kind of collaborate with a sex therapist. Like in my dreams, there is kind of like something like this. There might be if you have really good healthcare or if you can find like this specific niche thing, but I feel like sex therapists should have information too, specifically around how to reconnect or connect with your partner after, a brain injury, sensually, sexually, relationship wise, communication, like things that are necessary to get an expert's opinion on.
I mean, Nisha's right. I so wish as far as I know, this does not exist, but one of my great hopes for the book is like it will reach sex therapists and therapists in general, right? Because this is a cultural gap. We don't, we might have therapists that deal with disability. We might have people in the industry that deal with sex, but there isn't a lot of crossover, and it's time. It's definitely time. And I hope that this conversation and your remarks will inspire people to think about that, because there are great resources out there for people who are dealing with brain injury. Like the Brain Injury Alliance has posts in like, I think every state. There's an amazing conference called Love Your Brain that brings people together, and they do things like, panels and yoga, and it's like a great welcoming space. And they have like former Olympians on who've had brain injuries.
Oh, wow.
It's really cool. It's real. I mean, it was one of the things that I found, I think a little too late for me, but I love them, and I'm glad they're out there for people. It's never too late, I guess. But what you're talking about, this gap of like, how do we help people navigate sex after something like a brain injury? It's a bit uncharted territory.
Wow. Well, you definitely have made a lot of waves in talking about it. So I'm really, really glad to be able to chat with you about it. And thank you for your vulnerability and for your story. I really, really appreciate it. And
thank you. Thank you for talking about this, because we don't talk about this.
Yeah. And anytime you want to talk about this, I am down. But yeah, that was so wonderful. And now we're going to move on to a fun segment called Bedroom Brainiacs, where we have sex trivia. And in a previous episode, I knew some of the answers, and in this episode, I don't. So we're going to be doing this together. Okay, so the first question, and maybe what we can do is we'll decide on the answer together, and then we'll check it, and then we'll check to see what the answer is. Okay, so the first one is, what country has the highest average number of sexual partners per person? So we're talking like 1 to 2 to 3 question. I don't know. It's kind of like how many what country do we think is very sexually active and poly and open? Question mark.
I was like, it can't be the U.S. because we are too uptight for that.
Okay, so this is multiple choice. We have A, United States, B, France, C, Sweden, or D, Australia. What are your initial thoughts here?
So it's per person, right? So it's not like total population because the U.S. just is a huge country.
That's right. I think it's per person on average, highest average. I feel like France is an interesting one because it's just like they love to fuck over there.
They do love to fuck. The F is for fuck.
The F is for fuck. And like Sweden, I don't really know. It feels like they're very family.
Cold. It's very cold.
It's too cold there.
I'm not leaving my house.
They're not going anywhere. And Australia,
the only thing I feel like Australia is interesting because fucking anything, they have sharks. Anything goes in Australia.
Oh, that's true. And they have really scary animals and insects.
Terrifying. Yeah,
so maybe they're just super horned up for being scared all the time. It would probably be between France and Australia for me.
Yeah,
Which one should we go with? What do you think?
I say let's go with the weirdo Australia.
Let's go with the weirdo Australia, and let's check the answer. The answer is Australia.
Yeah.
Wow. Wait, this is amazing. Okay, yeah, I wonder. I gotta Google this later. I'm curious. I wonder if it's because they're so far away from everyone that they're like, well, we got to all fuck each other, I guess, if like we're not able to travel as much on our gap year. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what goes into it? Okay, number 2. There's actually 4 questions that we have here, by the way. What percentage of people worldwide have engaged in a threesome? This is a great question. Ooh. Is it A, 5%, B, 10%, C, 15%, or D, 20%?
My gut says 15.
Ooh, I was gonna guess 5. I wonder if we should go with the average of 10. We could go.
Okay.
I like
that.
Okay. Do you want to talk through why you think 15? I'm just curious.
I'm imagining this is reportage, right? So I feel like people might over report and under report.
So maybe that's perfect for the average.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like in my bubble of like the Bay Area and like New York City, of like 2 places that I have friends and family, like mad people are having threesomes. But I feel like in Kansas and Ohio, maybe not many, right? And the population in the middle of the country is, and it's worldwide, so who knows?
So France is picking up their
and Australia clearly. Okay, let's see what the answer is here. The answer is 10. We got it right.
We are great. We are geniuses.
We're crushing it. We are indeed bedroom brainiacs is what we are. So 10% feels right to me because it's like, not super common, but I think it's becoming more common. Like people are becoming more open. And I don't know, in the countries with like the top populations, like India, China, Brazil, like US, right? Like people aren't like in China. Maybe there's an underground culture of threesomes, but it's definitely not like talked about like it is in certain places of the US. Intriguing. Number 3, what is the world record for the largest orgy? Is it A?
This is
one. Really, it's a lot of people.
Too many people.
Oh, too many. Is it A, 100, B, 250, C, 500, or D, 1,000 participants?
I feel like I literally saw this on my feed like a year ago or so.
Oh, dive deep in there. What is it?
I'm not going to remember. So tell me the numbers again. This is the fun part of having a brain injury.
Okay. 100, 250, 500, or 1,000. My gut, I don't know why, is 1,000 because it's just like, I don't know why. I just feel like it's like, if we're going to get a bunch of people together, then let's go big and let's make it 1,000 people who are just fucking each other.
I say we guess that.
Should we go for it?
It would be sad not to guess 1,000.
It feels crazy, but the answer is 500.
Oh, I was going to say 250. So I feel like, again, we're in the
middle. Average. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Okay. That's really funny. 500 people is still a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
Like, is everyone like sucking and fucking at the same time?
Just think of the smells and the amount of stuff on the ground. That's all I can think of.
Actually,
just like, that's why I'm like, this is so gross.
Yeah, it's really nasty. I hope there were a lot of condoms.
Yeah.
I hope there were, waterproof sheets.
Somebody thought they were fucking somebody, and turns out they're fucking one of the other 500 people. That was happening.
Right. They're confused.
Oh shit! Sorry.
There's too many. Wow, that is crazy. Okay. The fourth and final question of Bedroom Brainiacs. This is such a fun segment. I'm so glad that we added this.
That's great. I love that we're doing it together.
Me too. It feels a little less scary, I think. Number 4, which of the following animals has a mating season that can last up to 14 hours? Oh, sorry. It doesn't say season. It says session. Okay. I was like winter? Is there winter 14 hours? Okay. So mating session. They're fucking for 14 hours? That's what that means?
That must be what that means.
Okay.
And it's an animal? It just says animal.
Here are the 4 choices.
Okay.
We have sloth, koala, anteater, or bedbug.
Oh.
Ew.
I think bedbugs are fast.
You think so? They're like, and then they just.
You can hear the springs on the bed.
You can hear the springs on the mattress. That's fucking gross. I don't even know.
I can't even think about it.
Honestly, like koalas seem pretty horny.
Sloths move so slowly that scientists tried to study them and had to end the experiment because they're like, they don't move at all. So I wonder if it just takes them 14 hours.
I mean, it's definitely possible. I feel like that is the most likely one. I know jack shit about anteaters, so I'm not going to guess that.
I can see the shape. That's all I got. I have no
other. Just the long snout.
Yeah.
Let's go with sloth and see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is bedbug.
Oh. How could they become more repulsive?
Oh my God. I just
wanted it to be fast.
I never want to see the word bedbug again. Oh. It's so gross.
Oh. Well, I mean, you lived in New York, so
that's true. I do have a lot of friends who have had bedbugs. Pretty nasty. Thank you so much for playing Bedroom Brainiacs.
Yeah, thank you, Seth, for that one.
Thank you. Thank you, Sadie, for writing these out. This is great questions. Mm-hmm. And the fourth and final segment that we have on today's episode, this has been so fun, by the way, is Booty Call, where you, listener, can go to our link tree in our Instagram bio, and it says like Booty Call DB, and you can leave us a voicemail. You record anonymously, your name and face will not be mentioned, and record anything you want, like a silly sex story or a question, or if you need advice, or if you're pissed at your roommate for fucking all the time, you want to just vent to us, you could do that. We'll just listen to it and then we'll discuss it.
Hey DB, I'm 23 years old and I've never really had any romantic relationships with anyone or had any sexual experience. I'm tired of being a virgin and just want to lose it at this point to someone and get over the pressure as I'm getting older and older. Would it be all right for me to lose it to someone I'm not in a relationship with?
Ooh, this is a good one.
Yeah, that's a great one.
I am really into this. Thank you so much, listener, for sharing this. First of all, I feel like it could be a really, really embarrassing thing, just societally, culturally, for us to admit that, hey, we've never had sex before and we want that and we want connection with someone and we aren't able to do that for whatever reason, or just haven't done it yet. So let's get Annie's thoughts on this clip first.
Yeah, I just want to also echo appreciation because it's a really intimate, vulnerable ask. And I guess the thing that comes to mind is I can't help but ask, okay, when you're thinking of doing this, who's in your head? When you're asking this question, when you're saying, is it okay to do this? Is it parental approval? Is it what your friends will think? Is it who's in your head when you're thinking about doing this or not doing it? And I mean, I can totally appreciate this decision to just like want to have the experience and it just to be for you and your desire and what, your interest in just like having it and not thinking about the pressure. So I think like, yeah, fine. As long as it feels comfortable, safe, it could be a stranger, it could be a friend, it could be, like I say go for it if you feel like you're ready and this is coming from you and not other people around you.
Totally. I think that like, if this was like a 15-year-old and we got this message, right, I would say, hey, like, do you feel prepared for the risks and the rewards of sexual intimacy and potential intercourse? Like, are we talking, unplanned pregnancy? Are we talking unwanted STIs? Kind of like, what are the risks? And then the rewards are connection, feeling really good, feeling confident, having pleasure, like all of these things. And I feel like there is a difference in my mind if someone is 23 and saying, hey, I just haven't lost it yet. Maybe because I have this idea in my head that I need it to be with someone who I really love, or I need it to be with someone who really, really understands me, right? Like for your first time, it is important for you to feel comfortable, safe, like you are able to ask for what you want, for you to be able to set boundaries. And maybe that looks like not fucking the first person who you date on Tinder or an app, but maybe after you've dated someone like and went on like a couple of dates to like build trust with them, or if it's a close friend who you're attracted to and just want to like talk about being intimate with them, I also say go for it. I think that like while there's never like a right time or a perfect time to be scared about like what might happen when you engage in sex, and especially if we're talking about sexual intercourse, the only way that you can really know how you feel about it is if you try it. And at any point you feel, hey, I'm not into this anymore, I'd like to stop, that person needs to respect those boundaries, and you have every right to say, hey, I actually changed my mind, I'm not into this anymore. And so I also say go for it. I think that's a great idea. But yes, thank you once again, listener, for sharing this story with us. You are not alone also. And here's a perfect opportunity to talk about masturbation, okay? Because even though there's so much pressure and emphasis on losing your virginity and having sex with someone else, sex with yourself is the most wonderful way for you to know what you like, helps you sleep better, de-stresses you, can help with period cramps. Like there's so many benefits to masturbation, specifically for people with vulvas. And I think it's really, really powerful to use a sex toy or your hands or whatever that you're interested in using, hump whatever you want, as long as you're in the privacy of your own home, or somewhere private, or in the car at an Indigo Girls concert. And then you can know like how to express that to a partner eventually, and sex with a partner will become much better. So plug for masturbation always. And with that, Annie, I just want to say thank you so much for being on. This has been a fantastic episode. You're so wonderful, so dynamic, so vulnerable, and it's a pleasure getting to know you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. This was so fun, and thank you for doing the good work out there.
Our creator, host, and executive producer is me, Danielle Bezalel. Our communications lead is Catherine Cohen. Our producer is Sadie Leegee. Our marketing coordinator is Mitch Coburn. Our social media coordinator is M. Kirsty Frazier. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Thanks so much to our featured guests, partners, and listeners. Want to partner with us? Email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. Do you have a silly sex story to share, need some advice, or have thoughts on the episode you just heard? Give us a booty call for a chance to be featured on the podcast. Check the show notes for the details. For more sex ed content, follow us on IG at sexedwithdb podcast and on TikTok at sexedwithdb. Want to know your sex toy zodiac sign? Go to our link tree on our IG now. See you next time.